Emma, a story by Casey Werelian. She's always been there, in the forest, for as long as anyone could remember. My grandparents used to tell us stories about her. She was once young and beautiful, the pride of the town. But beyond her beauty, she had a wit that could cut down the toughest man, and she could sing. Emma was her name, and Emma had her choice of suitors, but none ever captured her heart. Not like that mysterious out-of-towner. Rumor had he had come from some far-off land. He was travelling, looking for inspiration for his stories. He'd come down to the tavern to listen to local legends, not knowing he'd soon become one. It was one dreary October when he was sitting in the bar, documenting drunken tales, when he saw Emma. She was singing on the stage, a mournful song of lost love. The attraction was magnetic, and soon they were inseparable. As months drew on, they grew closer, and the strangest time in town was drawing to a close. They both knew time was short and would spend every waking moment together. One night, when the fog was dense and the forest around the town was still, they decided to go for a stroll. Hand in hand, they walked out of town, and neither would return. Everyone thought they had run away together, until a local hunter found a clump of Emma's beautiful raven hair, bloody and matted to a rock. Back then, they weren't sure what happened, and we aren't any closer to knowing the truth today, but that hasn't stopped the town from guessing. Some people think the young lovers quarreled about him leaving, and in the argument he pushed Emma, while other people think he told her he was leaving and she couldn't bear the thought of being without him. Whatever may have happened, neither of the bodies had ever been found, and most people assumed the man left town that night. The legend grew and spread through the town, especially after people spoke of seeing a woman in the forest and hearing a soft song coming through the dense thicket of trees. Personally, I don't think Emma ever left. On cold, foggy nights, I can hear a whisper on the wind coming from the forest. It sounds almost like a soft ballad of lost love. And even stranger yet, not one woman has gone missing in our forest. There are plenty who should have. I wish it weren't so, but it's not uncommon for a woman coming into town, bedraggled and in a panic, telling a story of a date gone wrong, or a man finding her on a walk and trying to attack her, only to be saved by a woman. A woman who is thin and wispy, with raven black hair and tear-stained cheeks. A woman whose feet don't touch the ground and doesn't seem quite right. We always believed them because the man who tried to hurt them never come back, and we never find any trace of the man. I know Emma is still here because she saved me. When I was a little girl, I used to run to the forest to escape home. My parents were self-destructive at best. My dad was a raging alcoholic, battling demons left from the war he didn't want to fight. And my mother was a shell of a woman. 15 years of broken bottles and promises will do that to a person. And makeup can't hide the bruises left on someone's soul. They had me late in their marriage. I think Mom hoped my birth would be the miracle that saved the marriage, but it didn't. Dad was so far gone, I don't think anything could have saved him, and I quickly learned as a child to keep my head low and to stay quiet. The forest seemed like the one place no one would go to find me. I always had to come back home, but for a few hours I was safe. I would listen to the song on the wind, pretend I was a brave knight who could swoop in and rescue my mother, imagining my dad was an evil dragon and I would do and imagine anything that fulfilled my childhood wishes and dreams. I even had a favorite rock by a small pond where I would sit and do homework or draw. No matter how drunk or angry Dad was, he never bothered coming to find me, and looking back I almost wonder if he knew how it would end if he had tried. I hadn't been home from school long when I heard his truck in the driveway. He was home from work earlier than usual, and the air grew tense as the truck's engine died. Mom gave me some crayons and a notebook and hurried me outside. She had been through this enough times to know nothing good could come from such an early arrival. I had barely made it out the door when the screaming started. Dad has lost another job. He had shown up late and hungover one too many times. The screen door slammed behind me as I could hear the first bottle hit the wall. As his words flew through the air, I ran. This was bad and I knew it. There was something different about today. I don't know if it was his tone or the words he used, but something was very wrong. So I ran to the forest, to my pond, and before long I was scrambling up my favorite rock, where nothing could touch me, where my home and my father didn't matter, where my mom wasn't hurting and where I was safe. It was so strange. Other people would talk about the song on wind, but at the pond it was almost like hearing it whispered in your ear. I could never make out the words, but its ethereal sound was somber yet calming. I would watch the stillness of the pond, remembering the stories of Emma, and picture her life playing out like a movie on the glassy water. I always saw a beautiful young woman walking off into the sunset with the mysterious writer. I now know that isn't true, but I think as young children we all have innocent hopes deep inside us. With the snap of a twig, my peace was broken. The sanctuary I had created was violated. All I had to hear was the footfall to know that Dad had found me. Without turning around, I could smell the alcohol emanating from him, and I could feel his unbridled rage penetrating the air around us. The water next to me rippled with violent dissipation as I felt Dad's hand wrap around my ponytail, yanking me to the ground. Instinctively, I curled into a ball with my back to him and my knees tucked tightly in my chest. After the second blow from his steel-toed boot, I gasped, opening my eyes for the first time since he had wrenched me from the false safety of my rock. Looking back at me, wedged deep in the crevices in the rock was a skull, hollowed eye with long, dark black hair shrouding around it. I screamed, and my dad's rage intensified. I heard the rustle of his pants and his leg swung back for another kick, but the blow didn't come. Instead, a loud shriek echoed through the forest. Looking back over my shoulder, I saw a woman. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Her tattered clothing and long hair swirled around her face. Patches of her tissued, thin and brittle skin were missing from her face. Her jaw hung slackly and her teeth were exposed through shreds of lip that still had traces of lipstick on them. Her eyes were cavernous sockets with a deep red glow burning within them. Her gaunt skeletal arms reached out towards my dad, with her claw-like fingers digging into his shoulders. He bellowed in pain as the blood ran down his booze-stained shirt. With no effort, the woman flung him across the pond and hit a large tree with a resounding thud. As I inched myself backwards toward the rock, she came closer to me. She was moving slowly, mirroring my speed. I was trapped with nowhere to go, and I was panicking. I sobbed harder than I had when receiving the brutal beating my dad had laid out for me. She reached out towards me, and I closed my eyes, anticipating the same fate my father received. Something gently touched my cheek, and when I opened my eyes, there was a beautiful woman before me, with long black hair and a beautiful gown. Her eyes burned with an indescribable intensity as she wiped my tears. Her skin was soft and warm, as was her smile. The being in front of me seemed wholly human. In the distance I could hear my father move, and the woman turned towards him, and with a flash, she was the heinous monster I had seen just moments before. My father was struggling to stand, and as he struggled, the woman turned back to me. She was once again her soft and human-looking self. She touched her head to mine as she whispered to me, telling me to run. I stifled my tears and nodded my head. With a flash, the woman was soaring away from me. the tatters of her flesh and clothes rippling in the wind as she barreled towards my father, and I ran, faster than I ever imagined possible. Each one of the father's screams seemingly increased in speed with which I took every step. Before long I had reached home, and as I ran through the back door I found my mother crumpled on the floor. This beating had been more severe than those in the past. Her clothing was soaked with blood, and her face was so swollen it was almost unrecognizable. When she saw me, she started sobbing and crawled towards me. We held each other and cried together. We called the police and filed a missing persons report, but we knew Dad wasn't coming back. They whisked Mom away in an ambulance, and the wail of the sirens seemed like they were ringing in a new era in our lives. Emma saved us that day. Weeks later I returned to my spot, and it was as quiet and still as ever. I stared into the pond, wondering about what had happened, when I saw the reflection of the kind and gentle woman who had saved me. Turning to look behind me, she wasn't there, but there was a locket on the ground next to a crevice. I picked it up, slowly turning it to reveal Emma's initials. Inside were pictures of who I assumed to be Emma and the stranger. His face had been clawed out, and all that remained of the image was the body of a seemingly tall man in a dark coat. When I returned home, I told my mom about the skull and showed her the locket, and she once again called the police. After making up a story about how I found the skull and locket, they followed me to the pond. They quickly taped off the area, treating it like a crime scene, even though I was sure the skull was far older than they anticipated. It didn't take them long to come to the same conclusion I had. They were able to recover most of her body and were investigating the man pictured in the locket just to see if they can find any answers about the mysterious writer. The case is well over 100 years old, but we were all hoping for closure for her. According to the evidence they could find, she had a large amount of head trauma, and a bone in her neck was broken, indicating strangulation. She also had several broken bones that had never been set properly. The police suspect that the mysterious man wasn't as kind as everyone had thought. It's now believed that Emma had rejected his advances or refused to leave town with him, and he in turn killed her. She had a beautiful service and burial, attended by most all of the townsfolk and all the women she had protected over the years. At night we can still hear her song on the wind, so I know she's still with us. And even with answers about what happened to her, she may never leave. In death, she is able to save us, like no one could save her, and part of me thinks she wouldn't have it any other way. We've come to accept that when a man from town goes missing, it's probably for the best. It hurts sometimes, especially when it's your cousin, or the star quarterback, but we know Emma has her reasons. As long as her song calls from the forest, we know we are safe.